Robert Mondavi vowed to make a great wine for every American table. And that's exactly what he did. His spirit lives on in every bottle of Woodbridge by Robert Mondavi, from one for all.
Welcome to the first part of our second panel discussion on how COVID-19 has affected and in many ways completely transformed America's food service industry. I'm Michael Ambrosino for Latin Biz Today. Joining me for this conversation are Chef Carlos Gaytan, the celebrated chef and creator of the acclaimed Mexique and Suco restaurants, who was awarded Chef of the Year by the American Culinary Federation in 2011 and was the first chef of Mexican descent to receive a Michelin star in 2013 and then again in 2014. Also, Danny Meyer, the founder and CEO of the Union Square Hospitality Group, a family of successful businesses including Gramercy Tavern, Porchlight, Tacocina, and the much-beloved Shake Shack brand. To date, Union Square is responsible for 28 James Beards Awards and 3 Michelin stars. And finally, Tracy Nieporent, the partner and CMO overseeing public relations, communications, promotion, advertising, and charitable events for the Myriad Restaurant Group that includes notable restaurants Tribeca Grill, Batard, Nobu 57, and the Porsche Grill. All right, well, welcome everyone. So good to see you. First section here, we're going to start with the continuing challenges of COVID. And just to give our viewers a sense of what's been going on as we celebrate what is loosely the first anniversary of being in this pandemic, the restaurant business, unfortunately, has lost almost 5 million jobs, which is hard to even fathom. 100,000 restaurants have closed nationwide. And it's estimated that so far, since the beginning of the pandemic to roughly now, there's been a loss of anywhere between $130 to $150 billion in revenue. And we all know that this is not just the industry, but its effect on all food service and food systems and also food culture. But I'm curious, as we get into our first round of questions, we just had the second stimulus package that just passed. That was for $1.9 trillion. And I believe embedded in that is the $120 billion Restaurants Act. So Danny, I kind of want to start with you, and I'm curious, how has Union Square Hospitality Group been faring during COVID, and are there some positive examples of how the federal relief has aided your recovery?
Two very, very big questions, Michael. You know, it's been a really, really hard year, exactly 1 year, because we closed our restaurants officially on March the 12th. Of last year. And it was really within about a week and a half of that we said, this is going to go on a lot longer than we expected. And then we laid off, up and down, probably close to 90% of our company. And at that point, we had 2,400 employees. So that's a lot of human beings, and went through all kinds of things we might be able to do to help our out-of-work colleagues. We raised $2 million in a 501c3 called the Hugs Fund. And that lasted, only a small amount of time. And to your second question, the government assistance has been very, very spotty. We're all very hopeful that this latest round of stimulus is going to really be a great shot in the arm for our industry. But I think it's important to understand, first of all, there's 3 different kinds of government that we have been trying to work with. So on a local basis, we've been trying to work with the city. And I'd say the single best thing the city has done has been to permit outdoor dining, and presumably in an ongoing way, because we've all now learned how to do it. We haven't been doing it during the cold parts of the winter, just because it's really, really hard to take your propane heaters in and out and have them picked up and delivered, because you cannot store them in a restaurant, you come to learn. But that's been a good thing that the city's done. What the state has done has been much more connected to some of the state liquor laws that allowed alcoholic beverages to be served off-premise or sold for off-premise consumption. And of course, the state has been responsible for telling restaurants when they can open indoors and at what capacity. The federal government, though, is the big kahuna, because that's the part of government that can print cash. And the first round of relief, I don't think was incredibly helpful to our industry, which was the PPP loans, because number one, they were loans, not grants. And so if anything, you had more debt on the books. And the only way to make it a forgivable loan was to spend it on one of two things within a very short period of time, either your rent or hiring back people. But we were not permitted to open our restaurants during that prescribed period of time. And so if you took out a PPP loan, you either spent it on people in a non-productive way or spent it on rent for restaurants you couldn't open. So it wasn't really that helpful. Now, this latest round, I'm very, very hopeful about. We're still trying to learn exactly what it means for restaurant groups such as ours. But this would be a grant, not a loan, and it would in some way make a calculation between what your revenues had been in 2019 versus what your revenues had been in 2020. And so that could help us with some of the restart capital we're going to need to get back into business.
Carlos, I've been keeping up with how your restaurant's been doing by following you on Instagram. And by the way, I don't know if you have a restaurant dog, but it's very adorable, the one that's in the Instagram feed. So I was wondering if you could bring us up to date on the pandemic's effect to the state of your restaurants and how you've specifically been dealing with Chicago's COVID guidelines.
You know what? The city has been helping us a lot. The information that we got from them, I believe is the one that keep us, on top of the game most of the time. When same thing, when we close Suco, they told us ahead of time, you guys, we might gonna keep open few months, just the patios. And my patio was very small, so I had the opportunity to lose one of my business. There was just Panango, my bakery. So I knocked down Panango and remake or redo Suco. I opened more patio space and everything. So it's been helping a lot. Plus, I see in other restaurants what the city's doing, allowing people to basically close the streets and put tables on the streets. So it helps a lot. So by here is sweet and sour kind of. So we cannot celebrate that we're busy. In my part, we're really busy all the time, but that you're busy because other restaurants, they're closed and there's not many options up there.
Have you done anything specifically to generate being busy? Because I have talked to a lot of people who run restaurants that are high-end like yours, and rarely do I hear that they're busy right now, but that could just be in Boston.
You know what? One of the things that I do, actually, I'm manage my social media myself most of the time. And I noticed, when I learned how to make bread, I didn't know how to make bread. So, I spend this time a lot creating things, keeping busy everyone in the kitchen and creating menus, we learned so much, like to-goes, creating even hamburgers, I can travel well and everything. But one thing that I noticed, when it's a low night, Mondays normally, I create a tasting menu and $75 per person, 7 courses. And I post it in Instagram. And if I post it at 5 o'clock and we have only, let's say 50 reservations, they start calling, are you guys doing a tasting menu? Like, yes. And then at the end of the night, we do 120 covers and most of them, they come for the tasting menu. So, just being and Instagram and social media, I think it helps a lot.
Tracy, I was thinking about you the other day because in our previous conversation, we talked a lot about food culture. In Boston recently, the Boston Globe just reported that there's this closure of the Eastern Standard, the Island Creek Oyster Bar, and the Hawthorne. And these are all in the Kenmore Square district, close to the Hotel Commonwealth, which is really known as a dynamic night spot. And I was thinking about how you respond to when restaurants close. How does this change the ecology or the vitality of neighborhoods and even entire cities?
Well, I like to be a glass half full person, not a glass half empty person. But this whole situation has challenged us to our very core, and it really hurts the neighborhood. I mean, we're hurt in Tribeca because we're a little bit off the beaten path, where there are big office buildings nearby, and most of them people are working remotely, so they're not in the office buildings. So there's not a lot of people to feed into us during this time. It's kind of like having restaurants in the theater district. When there's no theater, where are the people coming from? Right. They can't be sustained just by people living in that area. So it's very tough. I mean, when restaurants are closed, it hurts the neighborhood. When the neighborhood is closed, it hurts the restaurant. So it's kind of it goes in both directions. The streets of Tribeca are very quiet for the most part. You can walk around a lot, but it's not the kind of quiet that you really crave. You know, it's because a lot of people have gone to live in other places for now, and so it's we were supposed to have our 30th anniversary for Tribeca Grill in 2020, and of course that all, you know, went by the wayside. And so we were open for a period of time, but then we decided to close because we just couldn't sustain itself properly. You know, if this business could work on a 20%, 25% capacity, it'd be a much different business. We're a dime on the dollar business, and we really have to be operating close to capacity to be profitable and to be able to hire the people of the skill level we need to do the various tasks. So, you know, the numbers just don't work. And I don't think it worked for a lot of industries. I know recently they've been talking about Broadway. Can the theaters open up at 50% capacity? And I would say probably they can't. It's just not at least shows that have big productions and orchestras and big casts, maybe one person show. But if they have to still have social distancing, and we may have to have that for a period of time, even as we get control of the virus, it still presents a lot of challenges.
Yeah, speaking to that, Danny, I was curious because one of the things everyone's struggling with is CV variants. And the idea that vaccines work, but maybe they don't, the evolution of how vaccines are going to morph to deal with these variants. And in some cities, like the New York variant, it's very strong and people are getting COVID even faster than before. So I'm curious if there's any continued tenuousness to indoor dining. How is Union Square adapting to the continuing challenges of ensuring diner and worker safety?
Well, I wish I were a scientist so I could actually understand what these variants mean. I've always been a believer that ultimately it's going to be consumer confidence that's going to bring us back. People are going to, in a group fashion, either feel like it's worth the benefit risk calculation is worth it to go back into restaurants, or they're not. And a lot of this reminds me, Tracy and I spent a lot of time working together with NYC and Company, the restaurant committee back after 9/11. And people were afraid. People were afraid to go out. They were afraid of what human beings malevolently could do to human beings. And we got technology, also known as metal detectors, not just at airports, but in ballparks, in office buildings, and ultimately consumers felt confident that it's likely that I'll be safe if I get on this airplane. It's likely that I'll be safe if I go to the ball game. Well, now we're looking for that kind of thing that's going to give us confidence to come back here. Is there a virus detector? Not that I'm aware of, but there are things that I know we're experimenting with, working with the company Clear, which you probably know from the airport, who has created a product called Health Pass. And what Clear does is it knows that you're Michael, and you can use their app and actually let the app know, and the app actually that you've been vaccinated. And we are experimenting firstly with our own employees with this, because I think feeling safe going to work is where it all starts. And that will not only lead to confidence amongst the people who work for us, but should provide confidence for the people who are dining with us. And we're going to take a good look, because we may give that opportunity at the front desk for guests who are dining with us, because wouldn't it be great to know that you're dining amongst a bunch of people who have been vaccinated? So we'll see how it all goes. At the end of the day, I feel like a feeling I had a year ago today is not incredibly dissimilar to today,
Really?
which is that we have to make a calculation in our own minds. Obviously, government has been responsible for some of this, but at what point do I say, like for my entire life, at some level, I've known if I cross the street, I might get hit by a car, or I've known I might come home with a cold. I might even come home with the flu. But I went about my life and I went on airplanes because I calculated in my own mind that whatever the gain was worth the risk. And I believe, and I really hope that we're getting to the point with the number of people who have already had COVID, plus the number of people who are being vaccinated, that if I were to get COVID, I will probably not be hospitalized and probably not die. And therefore, going about my life is worth doing. And especially the economy of so many people's jobs, and as Tracy was saying, the livelihood of our cities. It's like, why do we like living in cities? Because we like being around people, and we like being with restaurants and with theater and culture. And there's going to come a point when this is just all going to have to come back together.
And speaking of coming back together, Carlos, your restaurants are such a prime example of just craft, cuisine, elegance, rich culinary experiences. I mean, as I looked at the websites and saw videos of the interior and the attention to detail to your cuisine, I thought, boy, how do you reinvent, a unique dining experience in an era of COVID? So what are some of the strategies that you've come up with that bring back the kind of intimacy that existed before COVID hit?
Well, you know what? One of the things that I practice here in the restaurant is, because I have another restaurant down in Mexico, we try not to do more fine dining and during this time, and we try to approach more like home cooking. And it feels much better to our customers by our conversations with them. It feels, like then we're not in times where people really want to go out and have a fine dining experience. They just want to go to a place that feel comfortable, that feel safe, that feel, the proceeds that you have in your restaurants are safe for everyone. And having an open kitchen, I think, is a plus, because people see the employees always wearing all the masks, working with the distance and things like that. All the procedures that the city has given us, we basically using everything. We do everything by the book. We check temperatures. We give people, information about COVID, about our supplements, things like that. But we've been changing so many things. We've been learning. I think in learning, it was the key, just being open mind, adjusting my food. I mean, I never thought I was going to have a hamburger in my menu. And when we start doing these changes, I want to have the most amazing hamburger in the city, and then there's just changing everything. And now I feel very comfortable, now in one day I can sell, I don't know, 40, 50 hamburgers and one evening. So.
Tracy, I know this is going to be kind of a big question, but as we sort of round off the first half of this conversation, I know that Myriad Group supports so many noteworthy brands, and I'm curious, how have you helped brands change their business models in maybe small or large ways to adapt to the limitations of COVID?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about suppliers, I don't know if I can say that we've been that helpful, in the sense that if we're not buying things right now, it's not contributing to them. In terms of people who dine with us, I mean, we try to maintain contact with people as much as we can. We've created a lot of friendships through the years, and it's very heartening to hear from people saying, we're waiting for you to come back, and we're looking forward to seeing you again. In terms of charities, there's a lot of charities that we're working with that are involved with food insecurity. So organizations like City Harvest in New York, or Table to Table out in New Jersey, where I reside, are doing incredible work right now and feeding people. It's just amazing that the lines that you see of cars lined up and people lined up. And these are not all people that are poor people or poverty people. These are people who have lost their jobs and are suddenly in a situation where they really need to have some sustenance. And so I think that our involvement with organizations like that has filled kind of a void. What's hurt for a lot of them is that they've had events in the past that were big fundraising events, and these things have been curtailed for now. But there's a lot of planning going on now for things in the fall. Hopefully they won't be virtual events. There'll be actual people events in person, and we'll get back to some degree of normality. But I think this year, this last year, we could never have anticipated something like this. I mean, this was something out of science fiction. We really could never have conceived that something would envelop us like this and just kind of change the way we look at almost everything. And this year is going to be kind of a year of recovery. We hopefully we get our sea legs back and we start to feel a little bit of degree of normality. But there's no question that moving forward, we're going to be a little bit concerned about other warnings that come down the pike. And maybe we'll be a little quicker to respond to things and not sweep them under the rug and pretend that they're not a danger.
I totally agreed. Last question for this half of our conversation is, I'm curious, it's for everyone. Are there any ways in which you've improved COVID best practices that any city, state, or even the federal government has taken notice and said, oh, wow, that's the right way to do it?
I mean, right now, I don't think it's the right way to do it. Just right now, I feel like everyone is learning from what's going on. You know, it's difficult just to guess what's going to happen. So we just go by whatever the government is telling us to do, you know, and changing things, getting a new style of life, probably, let's say that, you know, because I don't think we're going to get to normal anymore. Probably, you know, everything is going to be changing and we're going to be adapting our lives to the new style.
You know, we've debated with a lot of other restaurateurs about how quickly we should be able to reopen and whether or not the government is being too conservative and so on and so forth. But I think our feeling has been this, that unless we can feel that we're totally safe for both our staffs and for the guests and for ourselves, that it's very difficult to just say, forge ahead and let the chips fall where they may. I think that there's some people, because of the desperation of the financial aspect, and we all are facing the pain of that. But, you know, we have to face reality. And reality is that this was a cataclysmic situation, a very dangerous situation. And you can't expect people to put themselves in harm's way unnecessarily. And as Danny said before, I think people are going to have to get their confidence back. I think they miss us. They know that we provide an experience that is not easy to obtain eating at home, even though it's easier. You don't have to worry about parking and so on and so forth, and nobody has to take your temperature. But, you know, there's something to be said for being in a convivial gathering with people, with your family, your friends, your colleagues. And that's the context that we provide. And I think it's something, it's a show for people. It's a night out. It's something that's invaluable. And we look forward to delivering that again in the future.
Well, I want to thank you all for such a thoughtful conversation. And I really hope that everyone joins us for the second part of this panel discussion coming soon on Latin Biz Today.
Robert Mondavi vowed to make a great wine for every American table. And that's exactly what he did. His spirit lives on in every bottle of Woodbridge by Robert Mondavi, from one for all.